indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first order of business is the approval of minutes from September 15th, 2022. I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Yes, I'll do.
Do I have a second? Second. Vanessa. All in favor of approval?
Kathy, sorry, can I make a comment?
Sure.
So on line 118, the word invoice is used where the word estimate should be used.
Estimate?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. With that change. Excuse me.
I want to touch on that same area.
Okay.
And again, it can really only be clarified if we go to the tape itself, which I didn't have time to do today. But I don't remember a discussion about a separate kitchen. Or any discussion that the room can't be used for health and safety reasons. The only discussion I recall is the staff saying that they were uneasy about sharing that kitchen with Cat and Mel. But could we check on that before we totally approve the minutes? So it should reflect what was actually presented, and maybe I missed it, but our tape would verify that for sure.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? I don't specifically remember that myself, so.
Are we talking about the shared space in the?
Yes.
Okay, so we did have a meeting with staff and Mel and talked through just the logistics and like the needs of that kitchen by programming, and determined that one, it was not going to be a good situation sharing that space because there's a lot of different activities that are run out of that kitchen, more than we had thought before. Plus some of it is involving like non-food related activities. And so there was a big concern with cross contamination, and it just wasn't as feasible as it was when we believed there was only maybe one program a month being run out of it. And so even Mel came to the conclusion like it wouldn't be good, and it most likely wouldn't get approved by Department of Health, right? So we are currently looking into alternatives for creating like a cooking space within the cafe. And so we're sort of jumping a little bit ahead because this would have been my update for the committee, but the committee will probably meet sometime in November to review the numbers that the engineers provided to see if we need additional funding approval to propose to the board for creating a cooktop area as needed.
I think the question is, was there discussion about that estimate being prepared at the board meeting?
Right. So I recall that this was part of Alicia's committee report. So she actually referenced a discussion we had in committee about this. And I think if I recall correctly, my recollection is that there were no confirmed health or safety, Department of Health codes, but that there were questions about that. So to your point, Barbara, I don't know that anyone said explicitly in the report out last time that we couldn't share the kitchen. It just discussion about sharing the kitchen had been discussed, and questions about health and safety reasons had been discussed. So to answer your question, I don't recall them saying that we did not say that we couldn't share it. It's a moot point now, as Alicia's saying, but to correct the record, I don't know that this accurately reflects that.
That's my only concern. It should reflect what
Yeah,
the discussion was.
I'm agreeing with you.
If we could just check the tape and see actually, what was said here, and just, approve the minutes on that condition that Tim or somebody looks at the tape and it's actually recorded here.
Well, would we just not approve the minutes until the next meeting? I don't know that we approve it on the condition that someone reviews it. I don't understand that.
I think it sounds like what you said was that there was a discussion about sharing the kitchen in the Helderberg room, and there was discussion of health and safety reasons. So
Yes.
maybe change, cannot do discussion about sharing the kitchen in the Helderberg room and discussion of health and safety concerns.
Sure.
Is that,
Would it not be better to actually look at the tape and see what was actually said?
Well, we
Because I think-
can, but that wouldn't be an inaccurate statement, I think is what Kathy's saying, right? Like, that statement is general enough as a record of the minutes that it covers that we discussed it. We're removing sort of a verbatim notation, which would require us to go back and check the tape. But saying that we discussed the kitchen share and discussed health and safety concerns is an accurate record of the
But
minutes.
did we discuss it at the meeting? At the committee meetings you may have, but
I do remember there being some discussion of the kitchen. I don't remember what it was, but I do remember that being discussed.
Yes.
I was just saying that I'm.
So
I'd be
as a part-
comfortable if-
well, what it says here is the committee reviewed the
Yeah.
contract as presented with Elish, reviewing proposed changes. So this is a committee report. This isn't a board discussion. This reflects a committee report. And then after the committee report was given, then we actually approved, these minutes reflect that we approved the contract. So, I mean, I don't know. It sounds like the committee is okay with that actually what they did was they discussed sharing the kitchen in the Helderberg room and discussed health and safety concerns. So with those alterations, would that accurately reflect the committee report?
I think so. I don't know if Alicia can see you.
I can't,
Elise?
I can't see, but I can hear. Yeah, no, I think that covers it, because at the time we had initial discussions with the committee on it, and then, had to do some further research, but I think everything was spelled out in the committee report.
Okay, so what the minutes would be, as I see it, that there would be a separate estimate, not invoice, being worked on by Megan Brennan for the addition of a separate kitchen. There was a discussion about sharing the kitchen in the Helderberg room and a discussion about health and safety concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Does that accurately reflect your report?
Yes.
Okay. So, is the board, willing to approve the minutes with those changes to that paragraph? Is that acceptable? Or do you want to wait to approve the minutes to the next meeting? I mean, I don't really think there's any reason to, because it sounds like that accurately reflects what the committee, did. Any discussion of that?
I guess, does anyone, does anyone have the committee minutes from last month's board packet that had it was included, I think, because wasn't there a committee meeting minutes from that committee that were included in the board packet last month?
Yes.
And so if we could just check that and see.
Except for the members of the committee are confirming that that's what we discussed in our committee meeting, this is a report out of that.
I
committee.
thought it was a report of what was conveyed to the board.
Right, but those words,
So if those words were included in the, minutes that we got from the committee meeting, then that was kind of reported to the board and we're reflecting what was reported to the board. But if that was something the committee discussed, but it never actually got communicated to the full board, then I don't know that it necessarily belongs in the minutes.
except for that I think we might be making it more complicated. The adjustment that Kathy just made, it's a pretty general statement that reflects what the board did. So I guess, I mean, the minutes aren't verbatim. They're an interpretation of whoever wrote the minutes.
Right, I was just wondering if we could, it would just resolve it very clearly if we saw what was in that, the committee minutes that we,
You mean the committee report that was submitted?
yeah.
Except for that, I don't think Elise read the report.
But everyone received it in the board package, so that
But
was
this
kind of,
isn't an account of what was
I
received.
know, but it's a background of, it's,
I don't have it. So to answer your question,
No,
I don't have it. I don't object, but I don't have it. I don't know that I agree.
I'm
with
just saying that the
necessary.
minutes are supposed to reflect what happened at the actual board meeting. And so if there's something that happened in committee but was not actually communicated to the board, then I don't know why it would be in here at all. So I'm just trying to, and I don't have a distinct
Except for
recollection.
that I am on the committee and I was at the meeting and I just shared my recollection. So,
Is that, is that acceptable or, I mean, we could wait to approve the minutes. I'm not sure what else we would do with it other than confirm with, some report, but it sounds like the
someone can
report-
review the tape. I mean, if it's that critical, so.
So what's the will of the board? I mean, I think it's okay to approve it with those changes, but, if,
Why don't we just say a separate estimate is being worked on by Megan Brennan for the addition of a separate kitchen as Cafe Conmail as discussed at the committee meeting? And then just statement, correct?
and then just,
And leave it at that, and then keep the flexibility in the other part, because that's the meeting. I mean, it's not that big a point that we have to not confirm the minutes.
and then keep the sentence about the board held a discussion on the hours of operation.
Yeah, with flexibility,
Yeah,
that's it.
okay. And then just,
And then we can always refer to the committee report as received, but what we're saying here is a true statement. If the committee report talked about safety concerns and separate kitchens, that's fine,
separate kitchen, period.
Yeah.
Okay,
period, as discussed at the meeting, at the committee meeting.
as discussed. Okay,
It's a true statement, and, if somebody wants to go back and look at the committee minutes, fine.
all right. So we
I
want,
mean, it seems to be, a simple answer to a even less complicated question.
yes, I think we
By the
don't need
meetings
to
take
make.
4 hours too.
All right, so, I have a motion to approve these minutes. I will ask, all who, approve these minutes to please say aye. Aye. Is there
Aye.
anyone dissenting?
Marina has to abstain.
Okay, all right, Marina abstention. And hearing no opposition, I will mark these passed at 6:18. All right. All right, next on the agenda, public input session. Number 1.
We don't have any public input at this time.
Okay. All right, next order of business is personnel action. Let's see, we have personnel actions to accept the resignations of Leah Panus, part-time library page, Andrew Petrikowski, part-time custodian worker, and Philip Berardi, full-time department head in the Access Services Department. And to approve the appointments of Lauren Vincent as acting department head for Access Services, and Angel Jackson, part-time library page in the Access Services Department. Lauren Vincent is effective October 5th, 2022, and Angel Jackson is October 12th, 2022.
Minor point, but we changed the effective date for Lauren Vincent to October 3rd.
So.
All right, with that change, do I have a motion to approve the personnel matter items? Barbara, is there a second? Second. Right. All in favor of accepting the personnel actions as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Hearing no one opposed, I will mark that as passed at 6:20 PM. Right, next order of business is the treasurer's report for September 2022.
All right, good evening. Looking at the report, we'll look at the statement of net position or balance sheet. And there's a few things that I'm going to point out. Consistent with prior months, in the absence of the tax levy, our cash balance is decreasing by about 444,000, which basically funded operations and helped reduce accounts payable and accrued expenses combined that reduced. Capital assets are interesting because since a year ago, 6/30/2022, we've been accumulating invoices that relate to the building project, many of which will be credited back to the school. So we haven't done, we talked a little bit in Finance Committee, we're still in the process of finalizing the accounting and making adjustments to bring assets online to match up with approximately the September 2021 start date. And part of that will also be that we'll reduce the assets that relate to the school. And when we do that, we'll also relate the due, line 14, the due to Guilderland Central School District. So it's, I would estimate right now that the capital assets will probably go down about 1.6 million, and the due to Guilderland Central School District will go down by a similar amount. So it's just a wash, but what we'll end up with is the assets that we put into the building project. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is it's important when we get down below. I was asked to talk a little bit about line 7 and line 20, which they relate to the pension fund, the deferred outflows of resources and the deferred inflows of resources. And I said, can't talk about it because I don't know that much about it, but I'm going to do some research and next time we'll talk about it. But essentially, this too is the same balance from 6/30/2021. The auditors, I believe they get reports from the state and they sort of do the adjustments for this. It's a net long-term liability of about $400,000, and being long-term, we don't expect it to, be paid within the next year. It just sort of hangs out, but I've got to just refresh my memory on it. And the fact is, it'll change on 6/30, and that will flow through all the following statements. So I thought it was a good question, and normally I have a good answer, but I don't for that. And the reason I went through the capital assets is when you look at our net position, I think one time I said when we were looking at the income statement that brackets around numbers are bad. So when you look at our net position, we had a negative unrestricted net assets. And normally that would be bad. And it's not bad for a couple of reasons. That's calculated. Our total net position isn't going to change at all. Line 22 just represents what we put into capital assets. So this is showing $4.8 million. But as I said, that's going to be adjusted down by about $1.5 million. And when that gets adjusted down by $1.5 million, then the unrestricted net assets will actually go up. So it's probably at least $1.3 million. And it typically is gonna, we get the tax levy in and it's gonna go down because we get our revenue once or twice a year, basically. So when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's bad. Most organizations, if you see negative net assets, of course, we have positive total net assets, but the reason we break it out is because you have $4.5 million in net assets, but if a lot is tied up in capital assets, then you really don't have enough to operate on. So once we make the adjustments, it'll flow through and we'll see the effect of that, but that's what I'm estimating right now. And on the income statement page, so revenue, pretty much on budget. Salaries and wages continue to be favorable, but they aren't as favorable as they were. So when I saw it, so basically they're $4,000 favorable for this month and 35,000 favorable year to date, which means that for July and August, they were a total of 31,000 or $15,000 a month. So that favorableness has sort of dropped off. And I asked Tim, like, why is that? Because, because it's important, because we still haven't put in salary increases and hired the new HR position and things. So if it was only 4,000, it would be cutting it really close. But within the numbers, he said there is about $13,000 in a retro pay and a vacation payback. I hate to name people's, but for the director, that was, I believe, approved when his contract was approved. So given that, that's fine. I think if we had increased salary expense for other reasons, for some reason, that wouldn't have been good. So fringe benefits is very favorable. There were some expenses that were budgeted kind of on a quarterly basis that hit, which sort of skewed it a bit. And then there's a whole series of brackets, negative variances, where the actual is over the budget. But when you start looking at it, it's like when you look at, well, I mean, library materials is very small, but we talked about that in last month's. It's still $18,000. So I always look at the current month and the year to date and professional fees. I think there were some legal fees that hit related to the negotiations. So it's unfavorable, but year to date, it's favorable. Utilities is, you normally expect them to be high in the summer and high when you're heating, and they just we don't seem to get a break on them. So they continue to be a little unfavorable. But as you go down, most of the ones, at least on a year-to-date basis, are favorable. Line 14 technology, we've said before that about $10,000 was a one-time expense for computers. So on a year-to-date basis, we're carrying that. And insurance is unfavorable year-to-date, but very close for the month. I think there's some insurance expenses that we just expense at the beginning of the year when we pay them. So I think that's fine. Equipment leases, there was one item that we purchased that's in there that we may have to move down to capital items. So I think, overall, I think we're right on target in terms of the budget. The net income from operations is gonna, I think I didn't look, but probably in 11 of the 12 months, it's gonna be negative because all of the revenue comes in with a tax levy. There might be 2 months where we have positive because we stagger the receipts. So we will see that, but once we see the tax levy, then it'll be positive year to date and probably remain that way through the end of the year. So that's it on the financial statements. If there's questions. And the check run, you should have copies of the check run. I think there's some explanations down on some of the big items. I did look at them all today. I'll go back up. It's hard to believe that people actually enjoy doing that, but it is something to do. So I think there were some, project related items with furniture and awning and different things that are coming in now. I guess if there's questions, otherwise we typically do some motion to accept or something with that.
Yeah. If there's no further questions about the check register, could I have a motion to approve the check register? Okay. Is there a second? Mike? Right.
Yeah, I just have a question.
Sure.
One of them, the Albright Aquarium. It looks like there was a check issue and then is that like a donation from the foundation to the one that's in parentheses and then another check for another?
One is a void, I think, Barbara.
Oh, that's a void?
Check and then a voided check and then a reissue.
Oh, okay. But now will that be compensated by the foundation? I think they agreed to
We're working with them and
clean the aquarium.
we're working with them and Tim has sent an email. You know, this was a catch up as well. This was like 6 months worth of invoices that they had been sending us. It's not that much per month or it already.
And if we do get a contribution from the foundation, it wouldn't net on, it would show up as revenue within the financial statement. So we won't see the direct effect of that on the check register. It'll show up within other revenue.
But I think
columns.
they had agreed to do that, what, for a year, Tim, or?
I think it was 2 years.
Is there any further discussion about the check register? All in favor of accepting the check register, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Hearing none. Then we approve check register at 6:31 PM. Okay, next. We have the director and department head report for September 2022.
Thank you. So, excuse me, did somebody say something? I thought I heard. Okay. 2 days ago, this is technically in October, not September, but it's good news that everybody needs to hear, I think. We started our passport service, and in the first week, we are filling 20 appointments for passport applications. That's a service that Natalie has brought to other libraries and now brings to our library. And I believe we have about 8 or 10 staff who voluntarily added this to their job duties. And so that we have a diversity of people who are available to make the appointments. It is involved enough that you need appointments. For each of the 20 appointments, we will get $25 in revenue. So $1,000 in the first week of revenue sounds pretty good. So I do thank Natalie and those staff members for putting that together. Natalie is not feeling well tonight, but she is joining us virtually. So we had 2 days ago a department heads retreat. We had planned for a full day with some service work, but we ended up telescoping it just to a 3-hour session with a speaker and a lunch. And then when the new HR person comes in, we're going to try to plan an actual sort of more meaningful retreat with her. The general areas I've been working on are labor negotiations, cafe development, the HR search. We are wrapping up health insurance open enrollment today, and the finalizing of the construction stuff. There are still some significant things. Megan Brennan rides herd on contractors who, you know, have basically gone off to do other jobs. But as one example, if you happen to look at the carpet over here, you'd see a lot of salt staining. And that's because the concrete outside that door was poured flat when it was supposed to be poured slightly going away. So that concrete has now been fixed and we're trying to get the carpet contractor back to replace the carpet squares. I timed out on 2 commitments to Upper Hudson Library System and to the area this month. So for 2 years, I served on the Racial Equity Committee, which recently renamed itself the Equity Committee and is trying to embrace all sorts of equity concerns, not just those related to race. My term ended there, as did the term of Amy McCarthy of the librarian staff. And Seth Strock is still on the committee. I also finished my term with their Coordinated Outreach Services Advisory Council, which was an interesting group, but I'm glad to have a few extra hours a week for a month now that I don't have to go to those two things. Our safety committee has been active. We had 2 fire drills during the month, both planned. We also had a fire alarm that was unplanned and was not significant. But we've learned that if you're going to use the new toaster oven, you need to stand next to it instead of walking away. Natalie and the Sunshine Committee, which is our staff committee that does things to raise money so that they can then spend money on morale boosting things, baby gifts, cards for someone who's had a bereavement, et cetera. They did a fall market on Sunday, October 9th in the same spot that the farmer's market was. You recall that was supposed to end on October 2nd. So we planned this farmer's market and 42 vendors paid $25 each to exhibit and sell. And that money refreshes the coffers of the Sunshine Committee, which cannot spend public money on those kinds of activities. And then the farmer's market continued because you guys voted to extend him. He will go until Sunday, October 30th is the final Guilderland Farmers Market of the year. And then the next day is the trunk or treat in the parking lot up here, which we're hoping will become a very visible kind of flagship event for us. I have mixed feelings about the parking lot, but the visibility of it from Western Avenue is a fantastic thing. So I did attend a press conference on the new sidewalk project and rubbed elbows with our local dignitaries, Peter Barber, Pat Fahey, and Michelle Hinchy. And I thank Luann for her help with that. And also Luann's report, she talks about some of the Facebook posts and Instagram posts that are getting a big response. And the second biggest one for the month was the departure of Phil Berardi, and we talked about him last time. And in addition to making a lot of contributions to the way the library runs, he was also very well liked by patrons. And the main one was about the death of 102-year-old Katie McKinley, who was a frequent library user. And Mrs. McKinley, in her will, left the library $5,000, which we very much appreciate. She was a fascinating lady, and we'll miss her, of course. Let's see, the fiscal report. I met with Tim and David and George a couple of times on the building project. And I want to commend Tim Riley for tomorrow. He's going, I believe, to Town Hall for New York State retirement training in how to administer that. I wish I could go too, but I can't. The adult programming department really picked up steam in September and is going full bore in October, as is now the youth programming department. Maria writes, she's the chair of adult programming, and she writes about 3 programs in your report. One on spaces of enslavement in New York, one on a plant exchange where the people exchange plants, and a 4-part building a journaling practice workshop. And if you didn't get to read that, I would say that it was a really good summary of basically one aspect of our operations. So the GPL Kids and Family Facebook page is at 486 families. Nearing 500. That's a real success story. And in Lisa Pitkin's technical services or collection services department, we've resumed working with Guilderland High School on what's called the School to Work program. So we are able to host a student with special needs to help us with some important but time-consuming and sometimes repetitive tasks. So we're very grateful for that. And we also have started working with Baker and Taylor on a program called sustainable shelves, which takes our weeded items and we scan them, and then if they have a market to sell them online, we get revenue from that, which we use back towards services of Baker and Taylor. So there was a long-range planning focus group held by the Long-Range Planning Committee and conducted by Tim Burke and Mary Fellows of UHLS. I don't have much to say about it, but perhaps Barbara will at her moment. And we did all get the results as far as I know. The maintenance department prepared the new HR office, and and then I was going to mention the drainage issue that was fixed outside this room, and then I really like the fact that the 3 pages of UHLS circulation information that I included at the back of the report for you, we get those quarterly, and it shows a bar or a line graph that shows the growth in Overdrive, which is the name of the audiobook service that you actually, if you use it, it's called Libby, but the company is called Overdrive. Related to that, Christina Ronald, who manages the collections, sent an email today that to the staff saying that we are going to increase the Hoopla allotment, which is the other audiobook and video streaming service from 10 items per month to 12 items per month. The demand for electronic services is always high. And I found it really interesting. Like I probably dig into those numbers a little bit more than some of you, but I found it really interesting that, audiobooks are very, very popular, but 80% of the audiobooks used here in the last 3 months were used digitally, as opposed to CDs and other media that we have. We have several media for it, but most people just prefer the convenience of their phone, So it's kind of interesting how, the library, there's as much information from this library in here as there is in here. And that's my report.
Questions? Tim, I was just wondering about the electronic holdings and just how you use the data from that to consider which holdings, the electronic holdings you increase. So I personally am a huge fan of Libby.
Mhm.
Sometimes I have to wait.
Yeah.
I try to be patient,
Yep.
but I wanted to hear a little bit about like the calculus of when you decide to increase the number of electronic books.
Sure. So we're discussing that now, actually, possibly shifting spending toward more electronic books as opposed to print books. Like obviously you can't with $1 buy both, So the split is we're currently kind of investigating. It is largely done collectively by all the 29 libraries in UHLS. There are several different ways that they're purchased. There's sort of like sale programs and things like that. But the key factor in the wait time on Libby, I hope I don't misspeak, but in general, I find that new and exciting books are going to be on Libby, and a little bit older, sometimes some classics are going to be on Hoopla. But every time I say something like that, then I find that there's an exception that proves the rule. But the big problem with electronic books, and it's beyond the control of any individual library, is that the publishers charge a lot more for an electronic book than for a print book. And with Libby, they also limit, there is no simultaneous use. Whereas with Hoopla, there is simultaneous use, which is great. But there are lawsuits all over the country where state library associations are trying to get the publishing industry to start treating libraries like they treat other customers. So, for example, if Marcia wants to buy an audiobook, she can probably buy it for $12 or $19. The same book is going to be like $89 for us. And it's going to be limited to 12 uses, not simultaneously, but consecutively. And then we got to buy it again if it's popular. So, yeah, and it's, like with everything in life, with music, for example, like you go to a garage sale and there's CDs everywhere because everybody uses streaming services. the publishing industry wants to make money just like everyone else. And so they're trying to get you away from an ownership model and into a rental model, essentially. And we had such a bill fail. Governor Hochul, it passed both houses of the New York legislature, but it was vetoed. And my personal theory on why it was vetoed was that the publishing industry is largely centered in New York City and is probably a powerful lobby. So my expectation and hope is that California or one of the other large states will win their court cases, might go to the Supreme Court, I don't know. But, and that will then have an effect on New York so that we can have a level playing field. But the real interesting, it really drives me crazy. The average wait time for an electronic book on Libby, it hovers around 44 days. Now, if the average wait time for print material in any of our 29 member libraries was 44 days, it's usually 2.5. But people would be shutting the place down if you always had to wait 44 days to get a book. And this is part of the argument that all these state library associations are making to the publishing industry. But I think the opposite argument is when we sell a print book, we make X amount of money. And we feel like we need to make X amount of money when we sell an electronic book, you know? So I don't know what the answer is, but I know what libraries and patrons' perspective on it is. So that's a little,
Thank you.
you know, I could go forever on it.
I had a question related to that, which was, do we know, has there that, you know, you gave that 44 days number, has that changed appreciably in the last, you know, year? I've heard, and this is purely anecdotal, it might not be accurate, but I heard from several people that they felt that they were experiencing a lot more wait, there was less items available immediately than there had been in the past. And it seemed to me, and this, again, this could be either coincidence or just anecdotal and it's not accurate, but that the change was around the time when we did the agreement with the Mid-Hudson libraries to have a shared service. So I wondered if there's the impact, if those libraries were increasing demand on us more than we were on their collections so that it hurt our wait times.
That has been suggested, but I don't know that that anyone has figured out yet if that's the main factor. I do know that during the pandemic, you know, the demand rose quite a bit for these things. And but for some reason, we had the wait time down. I've been kind of following the number for 5 or 6 years. Frankly, before then, I wasn't that interested. But once I started seeing the usage numbers, then I started paying real attention to that. But anyway, we had it down to like 36 days at one point, and I think it might have even gone down to 33 days. I hope this doesn't sound wrong. Until this moment, it hasn't been my job to research that. It's somebody at UHLS, but I will try to find out the answer and see if that is a cause. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Corey. Do you happen to know
Yeah,
that?
actually, I just pulled this up because I was gonna share this in the report. So I don't know particularly about how that has made an impact, but they did pass in this last meeting last week that they're getting money for the Central Library Services Aid, and that is going almost entirely towards the online platforms. So it's like $213,917. And what they're primarily using it for is to get books that get additional copies of books that have long wait times. So they're trying to use that money to cut back on the wait time for people. So that's the intention, and they'll see how that plays out.
One time, 4 or 5 years ago, I played with this a little bit and computed how much money it would cost to reduce the wait times to the same as physical. And it was something like $12 million annually across Upper Hudson. My personal opinion is it's just not fair to charge libraries more than you charge any other purchaser. And that's, I think, I have a lot of lawyers in the room, but I think that's the nature of the suits that are being filed, you know. think there was one other thing I wanted to say to that, Mike, but at the moment, I'm gonna send myself an email to look into this a little more.
Get involved in grassroots efforts for this. There's an organization called Library Futures, and it is headed up by Kyle Courtney, he's the copyright person at Harvard and for the university, and he is leading sort of this movement to change how digital materials are presented. And you can sign on.
I remembered what I was going to say, which is that some of my directorial colleagues are tired of me because I sit at the monthly meetings and I say, demand for this rises 20, 40, 50% a year. Demand for print books stays flat. We're in the wrong business, you know. However, the business we want to be in is several times more expensive than the print, you know, so it's a quandary. But we're all trying. So.
To Mike's point though, and I know you're gonna look into it, I mean, it would be unfortunate if in our attempt to expand sort of access, that we inadvertently limited access. And so if we find out that the answer to this, to Mike's question, is that the wait time increase corresponds to sort of this opt-in, do we have any recourse so that and would we be able to know what our patrons are trying to access, and if it is in fact in our collection prior to the sharing versus the wait times that are anecdotally being reported are still on items that we wouldn't have had access to anyway if we weren't in this sort of consortium, if that makes sense. I guess I'm just trying to make sure we didn't harm access for our patrons in an effort to expand access.
Right, and I'll, a lot of answers there, but I'll say that it was an Upper Hudson library system decision to pair with, I think, the Mohawk Valley library system. And so I presume that it was, I don't know, but I presume that it was, you know, like, we'll monitor this and see if it does. The thought when they adopted it was to provide our library users in our area with more access. But I have seen at least one person speculating before Mike that that the agreement, we are essentially net lenders to that other system. And it's also just for this, we have a lot of newish board members. The whole membership in the Upper Hudson library system for a library like us almost automatically makes us net lenders of the physical material as well. Like we have, I think, the largest collection in Upper Hudson. If it's not number one, it's maybe number two. And I'm speaking about print materials. So, you know, like I actually was talking to someone from Colony this week, and the person said, well, you know, I'm from Colony, but I come to Guilderland because they have so much more of what I'm looking for, you know, and we send that stuff out. Now we bring in, you know, the numbers used to be in Phil's report, and so we don't have that this month, but we bring in, you know, 1,500 items a month or something like that, and send out like 2,400 or something. But you know, it's worth keeping an eye on in the long term because it's two separate questions with physical material and electronic material. With electronic material, I think the one question you asked is answerable, which is, could we ask some sort of a report that would say whether the average Guilderland patron was served well by the decision to pair with Mohawk. I got a text from Natalie and she says it's worth pointing out on the electronic materials that, or excuse me, the physical materials, that the item has to be sitting on the shelf with no Guilderland patron wanting it before we would send it out. And I should say that slightly differently. No patron of any of our 29 libraries already wanting it, because if Mike wants it and I want it, but Mike asks first, Mike gets it, you know, so. Oh,
That's for physical?
she says it's for electronic. So I'm glad to learn that.
Okay.
We will do a little more research and try to get you some answers, but I certainly trust Natalie on this. She used to work at Upper Hudson and, you know, so we'll poke around, Mike, and see if we can find something there.
Sounds good, Tim.
Thank you.
So,
I have two other questions, hopefully quick, unrelated to
Yeah,
that.
I'll try to
topic.
make them quick.
Yeah, first, I just wondered if there's any sense of how the search for HR director is going.
Sure, and I had that on my written notes, and I guess I didn't elaborate. So we interviewed 4 people in an initial round of interviews, completed that about 3 weeks ago. We brought 2 people back in for lengthier 3.5-hour interviews that included a component of meeting the staff. And just this morning, the committee, which is myself, Tim Riley, Natalie, Brianna Wakowitz, and Christina Ronald, had formerly included Phil Berardi, made a decision on a candidate, sorry, I'm missing that word, a candidate that we would like to reach out to and make an offer. So that's on my agenda for tomorrow.
Great.
You said her before.
They were both of the final, in fact, all of the applicants we interviewed
women?
were female.
That's
And, we interviewed the ones who were more qualified in HR. We did get, we got about 35 applications for the position, but some of them were real shots in the dark, like, I've always liked libraries, so I think I can do that, so the ones with the SHRM or PHR certification and the degrees in human resources and so forth were the ones who rose to the top.
Thank you. My other question was, is about Phil's departure. There was an email you had sent to us, and you said that you were working with Natalie about a possible reorganization of the staff. And I imagine that's, a work in progress or whatever, but I wondered if you could just very briefly sketch out like what you're thinking about or what prompted that or whatever.
Sure. Well, anytime a key person departs or a key position departs, it's an opportunity to look at the structure and see if you need to replace that person or maybe combine functions of different departments, divide functions of different departments. And so Natalie and I have been brainstorming, but also discussing that with Chris Lanchanton, because some of the thoughts we've had would be complex to work through in terms of Albany County Civil Service and CSEA. So we're following her advice on that. And we believe that the next logical step would be, and I invited Kathy and Alish today to join us in a meeting with Chris Lanchanton to discuss the available options. But we're trying to kind of right-size some operations that there have been some technological changes that we could take advantage of that shift our staffing needs just a little bit. But it's somewhat confidential, I guess, and I hate to use that word, but on the advice of the lawyer, she says we should talk privately before we bring that to you publicly. So, and we don't have any decisions made by any means. We're just juggling a bunch of factors that could improve our operation and potentially save money. So, if for the benefit of any employees watching or listening to this, it's doesn't. I wouldn't worry about it. It's not the kind of thing we're not trying to cut a bunch of positions or anything. So we're just trying to redistribute duties in ways that might be a little more efficient. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Was there anything else for Jill? Right, the next order of business is committee reports, and the first one is Building and Grounds, Alish.
Hello, I'm still here. Coming to you live from the Target parking lot. But I have a very quick update. You can see me now hanging out in the car. I just wanted to do a quick shout out. Thank you. My daughter's Girl Scout troop was there doing a tour on Tuesday. So many thanks to, I believe, Lauren and Amy, right, who gave the tour to them. So I'm just taking the time to say thank you now. They had a really great time. And they made some cards for the food bank. Say that
Great
again?
photos of that on Facebook, so, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it was so cool. But yeah, so I guess just a kind of a quick update from the Building and Grounds Committee. We did not meet, but I will just say that I have been the caveat to what was discussed earlier is I am trying to work with some information Megan had just given me this week about some numbers for potential solutions for doing the not shared kitchen option and creating a cooking space within the cafe. I need to discuss this with the vendor that we approved to sign the contract with and just get their input. And then I will have to take the numbers to the Building and Grounds Committee so that we can discuss those implications once we just confirm that those numbers are pretty solid and see what the impact will be to the budget that we had originally approved, which I believe was 30,000. And just see what we can do on that end. But we did have conversations since the last board meeting with staff and got additional insight and input into their use of that space. We realized it wasn't feasible to share that space. I know before it was a sort of, we had gotten that feedback, but hadn't done enough of the discussion with the staff and done enough research on our end to know whether or not that was true. And in those discussions came to the conclusion and agreed with the staff that it just was going to be a little hairy and it was going to affect programming negatively to try to ham fist a shared space between the two, the library and the vendor. So that's pretty much my update. I didn't know if people had questions on that, but it could potentially be a request coming in the next meeting for additional funding or potentially needing to call like an emergency meeting to get it approved, depending on when the vendor would like to set up shop. I know they were sooner rather than later, so just a heads up that might be coming down the pipeline once the Building and Grounds Committee can meet.
So Elish, did you, you said to me that I should work on scheduling a Buildings and Grounds meeting for the week of November 4th, is that correct?
Yeah, so I am going on vacation tomorrow, and then I will be back November 1st with a couple of days of craziness in between. So anything after the 4th would be probably doable. And you don't have to set it up necessarily. It's just we'll get a Google poll out to the committee to see that next week when people can meet, and then if we send out a WebEx from the library or however it's better to do it. I don't actually have an account on my end, so I know those sometimes can be restricted to time. So yeah, if we can get help setting that up, that'd be great.
Great, thank you, Elise.
And then I apologize in advance, but I was planning to just give my update and then drop off. So I got to run around and do some last minute stuff. So thank you, everybody.
Have a good vacation.
Thank you.
Enjoy vacation.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. All right, next, long-range planning, Barbara.
Okay, long-range planning, the Upper Hudson did a focus group of the library staff. I believe there were 9 participants, from the group. And you all have copies of their report. A couple of things that jumped out at me that I thought, possibly either the board can consider or admin could consider. The idea of the low-lying shelves was raised by the staff as well. And I know we've gotten a number of requests from our patrons that it's very difficult for those older folks to get down and see what's on those lower shelves. So I don't know if we have the space to not be able to use them or whatever, but that was definitely one of the suggestions that they came up with. Another suggestion that we would have to deal with is a recognition of the fact that many grandparents bring their grandchildren here, many of whom don't actually live in Guilderland. And I know we've expanded our ability to hand out cards to people that work in Guilderland. So I don't know if we would want to, as a board, consider that if the grandchild lives in Gilderland, if grandmother or grandfather would have access to a card. So that's something else, I guess, to consider. The other thing that they suggested was more outreach into the community. I know we do quite a bit of it, but they were suggesting that, if the staff was out and about perhaps a little bit more, there would be more uses for the library. And the other thing that sort of jumped out for one of the questions is that a number of the staff reported morale problems, both with the administration, ourselves as a board, and with the foundation. So I think that's something that over time, we should address and think about. I think the next step in the process would be to really, at our next meeting, have clear definition. The board has approved the mission statement. And then Natalie was going to bring that vision statement, to the staff. And we haven't really gotten a lot of feedback there as to any changes. I think we as a board were comfortable with the mission statement that we had drafted. But we'll wait and get that feedback. And then we obviously have to have some of these focus groups with the community. And we have to decide on a methodology to try to really get the people to participate. So that's all we have right now. We'll have a meeting hopefully before our next meeting where we at least can clear up that mission statement.
Thank you, Barbara. Finance. To be clear, did you just have a meeting?
Yes, so the finance committee had a meeting immediately before this meeting. We discussed a few things. There are two items that may require a board vote, and so I'll go through those first. One is the investment of the tax levy money. And as people remember or may know that our tax levy comes in large lump sum amounts that much of which we don't need until much later in the year. So normally what we do is that money gets invested in historically either in CDs or treasury bills that will come due, they will mature on a monthly basis. And so we'll have the operating funds becoming available month by month. And so last year we had a resolution to approve having our Capcom representative make those investments of those funds. And we think we need to do that again, do a resolution to approve that for the new this year's tax levy funds. And I think Tim Wiles has the language we approved last year.
I have the language. We'll need to change the amounts, so the other Tim can jump in with the amounts. But the motion last year was to invest up to $2.4 million. And also we need to change the next part in U.S. Treasury notes or CDs, and up to $600,000 in a money market account with Capcom. So the basics are to invest X amount of money in what vehicle or vehicles with Capcom. So.
And so the amount that we'd be investing this time would be 2.1 million. And we've been advised, I guess, that they're looking at CDs. I don't know that there's anything wrong with leaving the flexibility of having CDs or treasury funds in case the rates change between, when we approve it and when the money actually gets put in. But and then I don't think that's all at this point, right? Is that so just
Sorry for the money.
I don't, so last year we had the money in the money market account. Was that just because of the timing of when we were doing the vote that we needed to do that? Or I don't know that that's necessary.
Remember why, although I think that there was at one point, and you'll have to forgive me because I'm not Tim or his predecessor, but at one point there was a requirement that we would have $600,000 in a certain kind of account.
Well, there is that still,
Okay.
that's something separate.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's something separate. Okay. So I do not recall why we put 600,000 in a money market. Does it sound like it would be more liquid or?
Well, all I can think of is the liquidity and I was just gonna hold back that approximately that amount into the general fund to pay for December and January. We could move it into the money market and then sweep it back over each month. But that was probably what Carol was trying to accomplish with that.
Right, and just to follow up on that, the total amount of the first tax levy deposit is about 2.8 million and change, but 700,000 and change is going to cover the first few months. So that's not going to be invested in the longer term things. So it's only 2.1, the balance of that that's going to go into the CDs or whatever. So I think we would want to basically we use the language from last year, but change the dollar figure to 2.1 million. And I guess we would leave out the language about the money market account. So we just authorize to invest up to $2.1 million in CDs or treasury bonds.
That would do it.
All right.
So that's the motion.
So yeah, I'll make that motion for that resolution.
To invest up to 2.1 million in CDs or treasury bonds. That's the motion. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And last year, the resolution also said with Capcom. So
Okay.
now has Capcom's name changed?
It will be changing, I think at the turn of the year or so, but yes, I don't know that.
I think it might be, we might have gotten that language from Chris last year, so it might be good to
Yeah.
name.
I think we should just use the same language and change it only as necessary. So change.
We could say a division of Broadview. It's my understanding that's how both CEFCU and Capcom are referring to themselves in the meantime of the merger.
Okay, so motion,
In the interest of full disclosure, it'll be another check coming in a month or two for the balance, or most of the balance of that. So this isn't the full levy. Just so you understand.
so this motion is for 2.1 million and there will be another motion at some point for an additional funds. Okay, but not today. Okay. All right. Okay, motion by Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Corey. Okay, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Is there anyone opposed? All right, motion passes at 7:12 PM.
Is Ted still on?
Leave you dropped off.
Well, it was a little bit.
I just.
Yeah. Later.
657.
All right. So the second issue that I think we might need a board vote on is related to the balance of the construction funds. Now, when we had the construction project, there was $1.4 million in the budget for that project came out of the library's fund balance. And then the rest of the budget for that, it was just shy of 7 million was the bond issuance. It had been kind of our understanding, it had been the intention that if the library came in under budget and there were extra funds, those funds would get returned. Basically, they'd get returned through the school district, and that would kind of eventually funnel back to the taxpayers for those extra funds. But and George, if I'm getting anything wrong or need to, the details, just jump in or whatever. But my understanding is that in communications with the school, the school's finance, school district's finance people, they indicated that it would cause a lot of headaches and be very difficult to actually, if we give that money back to them, to do that. And they have recommended to us that instead we treat it as having depleted the bond money first and drawing on the money from our reserve fund afterwards, so that excess 300,000 and change would basically go back into our into the library's fund balance. We have questions about whether we are actually able to do that. It's not obvious that that's consistent with the language of the what is it, the referendum language. that was passed for the bonds in the first place. And it's not what we had, the general understanding when this has been discussed in the past had been that this money would be going back to the school district. And so the suggestion is that we find a bond counsel, an attorney who specializes in these bond issuances, to give us an opinion on whether we can do that. So that we know whether we can legitimately, do that or not, or whether we need to, whatever the hurdles are, figure out with the school district how we can return the money if that's the only, legal thing under the terms of the referendum. So I think the suggestion was that and would just be me or the finance committee, or the board would approve that we could identify qualified bond counsel that could review the terms of the bond issuance and give us an opinion on what we're allowed to do.
Who's supposed to pay for the bond counsel, us or the school district?
So I think that it would be appropriate for us to pay for it.
Because
Because it's a conflict of interest.
Well, I don't know, but because it's really not a school expense. I mean, there is money in the project to cover legal expenses. So in theory, I think it has to come from our money, but we could charge it to the bond funds. We'd have to work that out.
yeah, we're ready, willing, and able to give the school board back the money.
I understand, and I mean, I
I
had
don't
a
want to
discussion with.
over it,
No, but I mean, I had a discussion with Neil Sanders.
Yeah.
Neil Sanders, and it was a big deal if they do that, because I guess because they borrow the money tax exempt, and it's like, I don't disagree with it. It's like, you would think it would be easy to give somebody
Oh, I
that and
understand
everything,
that.
but they asked if we would do that, and I don't think it's unreasonable if we can help them out in that way, and I mean.
It's to the benefit of the library if it works out. We can.
Well, perhaps bond counsel can also tell us who should pay for it.
Again,
No,
again,
Well,
it's a legal.
But again, it benefits us.
should it turn out in our favor, it benefits us.
That's fine. I just wanted to raise the issue. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
make a big deal over it. So if you need something about a bond counsel, I don't.
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment that I did not think of yesterday when I was talking with George, or today when I was in the finance committee meeting? Gervin and Perlazo, where our retainer is, I don't know if they have bond counsel, but they have a top-notch construction lawyer who guided me through the bond counsel process. Now, maybe that's a conflict of interest because he helped set it up, but it may be something we are already paying for. So if Mike, if you want me to check, I can,
No, I think that would be fine. I think that they could give us, see why they couldn't give us an
Yeah.
opinion.
If they have a conflict, they should let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But does he deal in bonds or construction management? And, issuing bonds and working on
we'll have to
referendum?
ask him
Yeah.
that. So if he's not the right expert to get an opinion from,
Yeah.
he will tell us,
Yeah. It's a real specialty.
Okay, so how do we want to handle that? Then should we hold off on and we can.
Can we
check
make
the
a
words,
motion
make a
to
motion,
approve you in the case that we need you to
If we
do
need
that?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I move that we let Mike and the finance committee find us a bond counsel if we end up needing one.
I'll second that.
And I would say just Mike,
Okay,
unless the
sorry,
rest of the
Mike.
finance committee needs to be involved. I mean, unless anyone is opposed to that.
No, I'm not opposed to that. Mike.
All right, designated Mike as determining whether we need a bond counsel.
And then
As informed by,
Select and engage one.
by,
if we need one to identify and engage bond counsel to review
What
the,
use of bond counsel
Yeah.
and
Okay.
if so, you select.
all right.
all right.
counsel, bond.
Okay, with that, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
It's all on your shoulders.
All right, motion passes at 7:19. Moving right to potentially get a bond canceled.
And the only other things we talked about in the finance committee was we briefly talked about the timeline for the budget process, which, we're hoping to start up in early January, working on the budget for the next year. And this overlaps with the next one. The audit committee has not met yet, and we have had no update from the auditors since last time.
Personnel, Marina, we have at least one negotiation item for executive session.
Yeah, so I was on vacation for the last meeting, but we did have personnel committee meeting on September 21st. And Unit 1 negotiations, October 17. We have another personnel committee meeting October 24th. And another unit negotiation for unit number 1 for November 2nd. Unit number 2 is tentatively agreed to. They've ratified the memorandum of understanding. It's before the board for executive session. And unit number 1, we're making progress and we're still negotiating.
Okay, thank you. Anything for labor management?
No, I don't believe we met.
Correct.
Okay, policy committee, Vanessa.
So quick report out, the policy committee has not yet met, but we have a meeting scheduled for October 25th at 6:30. We are going to be taking up review of the 3 oldest policies, which include FOIL, investment, and designation. The policy committee requested input from the finance committee specifically around the investment policy. We have the privilege of having some overlapping membership with Mike. So that is our current plan. So if FOIL, investment policies, or designation policies get you excited and you want to come join us on the 25th at 6:30, feel free, but come prepared with your suggestions.
So may I comment briefly?
Please.
So I just happened to be looking, one of the board members asked me to determine whether a committee could meet without its chair. So I was looking at the bylaws for that, and I noticed something that I wasn't aware of. Probably you all are, but I think it's good practice to maybe just remind us of this if you're not aware of it. And that is that, of course, any board member can attend any committee meeting, but they can't count toward the quorum of the committee unless they're on the committee, and they can't vote. They can speak their mind and, they can tell you how they feel, but they're, like, if something passes in a committee, or if there's 4 people in a committee meeting and you get a 2-2 vote and there's a 5th board member there, that vote isn't, countable. Okay, good. In general, as a director, I would encourage you to go to any meetings you can, so. Okay.
Okay, COVID action has not met. Board development has met. We met actually yesterday evening, and we started to talk about things that we thought would make good topics for discussion. I think it was just a preliminary discussion, and we really determined that we needed to have more, like maybe some UHLS help at our meeting, just to kind of focus the discussion on to be more specific for proposed training for the board and how that should look and what topics should be look like. So I think I'm going to reach out to Tim Burke on this, and I will do that very soon, probably by either by tomorrow or early next week. And the idea is to have him possibly attend one of our meetings and just help us out with a more focused view of what we should be looking for, try to flesh out our ideas about what training we should have.
Sure.
So I don't know if you had anything else to add, Vanessa, but.
No, I think that's fair. We got the ball rolling, have a short list of some initial ideas. I don't think we're creating any super new content. It's not rocket science, so we wanted to leverage existing resources.
I just say, I think that we, was sent them to put a Roberts rules training is next week on the 27th at 5. And that's a good one. I have it on my calendar.
Yeah, and actually it was one of the topics that we talked about. I think that's a great opportunity, but I think the committee was interested in some recommended learning opportunities and some required ones. And so I think that we plan to make that opportunity available to all board members in a different format as well, in addition.
And just a good time to remind you all that starting January 1, by law, you'll have to have 2 hours of training per year, and you need to keep track of it. And then when we do the state annual report, we're going to reach out to each of you and say, can you prove that you had 2 hours of training this year?
And that was
If
part of our
we have 2
discussion.
hours of training for the board, then.
Right,
Then-
so we
Then you're gonna have to reach out to me, yeah.
that if
So-
we do that as a group through our board development committee recommendations, like twice a year or something, then we can ensure
Sure.
compliance with that.
Then maybe what I'll do, once that's rolling, is just hit yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, and then we would have the documentation.
Yeah, I don't know if they will require documentation, but save it if you get an email
Yeah.
saying thank you for registering to, this webinar or whatever.
Foundation, anything for the foundation, Narita?
They didn't meet last month, but they did vote, over email. They're very, not so formal. So there was not enough, I guess, in-person participation, so, but they did need to vote on whether or not to sponsor the trunk or treat event that Natalie's putting on and the library staff are putting on, for Halloween. They did approve $3,000 sponsoring, and that goes to candy, treats, allergy-friendly treats, prizes for best decorated cars, monogrammed treat bags, decorations, and pizza for all the volunteers. So it was very nice of them to still approve that, even though they didn't meet. And we're hoping to meet next week, maybe make it a dinner and a drink kind of thing instead of stuffy old boardroom. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe that'll help the
entice
attendance.
more people to come, and we hope that people do spread the word that that is an available opportunity to volunteer with the foundation. They're not as formal and they do a lot of good work for the library. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would emphasize that the foundation at the moment is down to somewhere between 6 and 8 members who are even considering coming to a meeting. There's a lot of people that have just emphasized other things in their life, and so they could really use new members. And if you happen to know anyone and they want to call me, I can tell them how it works and what's involved. It's been a great group for me as the director, but it was also a great group for me. I was a member of the foundation 2 years before I started working here. And if I wasn't a foundation member, I wouldn't have heard about this job. So anyway, sometimes volunteer service pays off.
So UHLS, I think you had given some reports.
Certainly, I did give a portion of that report. They did confirm that the fees have been set for the ULAN, is that how we say it? The ULAN service fees for the upcoming year. And ours has not changed much. There's a slight adjustment, but it's a very complicated process to get that figured out. And so that has been set. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is the UHLS Board of Trustees is considering signing. There is a grassroots effort from the American Library Association called United Against Banned Books. And so we are considering at our next meeting signing that pledge through the UHLS board. And I just wanted to present it, and I'll share a little bit more information in the link to what it's about for consideration at a future time on whether or not this board wants to sign it as well. But I'll send that through an email so everybody has a chance to take a look at all the documentation. Great. Thank you. Is there any old business?
I don't know, we discussed that the library got the award. You want to mention
Oh,
that?
sure. So the Chamber of Commerce 50th Annual Dinner took place a week or two ago. And a number of board members and foundation members, Marina and her husband, Kathy, and her husband, and some staff members were there. And we got the award issued by the town. So at this dinner, there are town awards and Chamber of Commerce awards. And it's back on my desk. I can't remember, but I believe it was called Best Renovation or Remodel, or Best Renovation and Expansion. Do you happen to remember, Kathy? Or-
I think it was best renovation. It might have had more words to that.
Yeah.
But I think that was.
And it's an attractive red plaque as opposed to the normal, brown wood with a gold colored metal. So once we find a good spot for it, it'll stand out a little bit. And a former, or actually a foundation member, but who's just kind of focusing on other things right now, Erin Landcraft, who is the spouse of Brian Best, our former board president, won the Best Small Business Award for her music therapy business. And it seemed like there was one other thing related to that, related to the library. We appreciate those of you who, Marcia actually bought tickets but could not attend, but we appreciate supporting the chamber. It's just a fun little note, but I'm good friends with John Phillips, Phillips Hardware and the mini mart over there in Altamont. And he is joining the board of the Chamber of Commerce, I believe. And the vote hasn't happened yet, but it will next week. And he said, I can't believe the library beat me out for that award. But I said, well, John, I thought you were the more deserving party as well. So,
Great. Any more old business? Any new business? Hearing none. Public input session number 2.
I got nothing.
Okay.
focus.
All right, well, we have need of an executive session for issues pertaining to negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law with the GPL CSCA, Unit 2, and issues pertaining to the employment history of a particular individual and matters leading to the promotion of a particular person. Do I have a motion to enter executive session for this purpose?
Yes, I move to go into executive session for the reasons you just said.
And
I
Marcia.
wasn't sure why you were raising your hand and I was like, we were so close.
Maybe a record.
All right, all in favor of going?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so we will have to wait until,
Yes.
I don't know if, does Natalie want to join us?
I'll text her. She was planning to.
She has the link.